Hello and welcome to Joy in Our Town. I'm Colette Snowden and I have two wonderful guests today, and we're going to talk about debating and how it helps in our public school system. And I just want to read something to the viewers right now. It says, some local schools here in Jacksonville continue to fall short of making the passing grade in accordance with Florida standards for academic performance. They are labeled as poor performing schools, something that is troubling to school administrators, parents, and the students who attend these schools. And we want to try to address this issue as well as find out what my guests are doing in the public school systems to make a difference. And I want to welcome Jermyn Shannon. He's founder and developer of Duval Urban Debate League here in Jacksonville, That's right. The Jacksonville chapter. And of course we have an instructor here, Kenneth Dikas. He's a teacher at Ribault Middle School, and you also a debate coach.
That's right.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
I want to open with an important question because we're talking about poor performing schools. Why are these schools labeled as poor performing schools? And either one of you can answer that question.
Right. Well, I guess with No Child Left Behind, introduced in 2000, President Bush signed into law a system of accountability for holding schools accountable for what they teach their students and how they perform on a national level. You know, because for a long time, people who were scoring like 1300s on the SATs, really good scores, would be passing with like C's and D's, and students from other schools getting like A's would be getting like 900s and 1000s on the SATs, lower scores. So I guess they wanted to even the playing field, so they came out with tests. So anyway, the test in Florida is called the FCAT, and schools are graded based on how they do on the how their students do on the FCAT. As for why so many schools in Jacksonville are labeled poorly performing schools, well, it's because their students aren't doing well in the FCAT. Now, as to why they're not doing well in the FCAT, I think there are lots of different reasons.
Some being?
Cultural, for example. I think a lot of the kids we serve live in cultures where academic achievement isn't valued, and I think the reason that might be is for years in the past, especially.
And when you say that, invalued by their
parents, right. Caretakers, aunties, uncles, whoever they may live with. And I think, you know, after the Civil War, after slavery, we were cut off from educational opportunities, and so our culture has sort of evolved without valuing these things, and we're kind of looking at living history even today. It's 2009, but this started hundreds of years ago. So I think when cultures, for whatever reason, don't value education and educational opportunities, you kind of see the low academic achievement that you see. Interesting,
because I've been in conversations with other instructors, teachers, and you always hear, well, the parent, it should start at home. Right. But then I've talked with parents. I was in PTA in the early years of my children, and they would talk about, well, there's other things the teachers can do. It's almost as if there's this effect of who's really responsible. But I kind of agree with what you're saying, that it could be that we needed to be productive back in those days, and then come forward. And as we see the changes come, we would have done better in some of our schools. And I know that across the United States that there are schools that are doing well, whether there are one race of students being taught at a school or whether there's a diversity. But that point you made has an interesting avenue, and we'll talk some more about it. I know there's some other things you all want to talk about. Also, I wanted to ask you, Kenneth, as a teacher, why do you believe poor performing schools in our area struggle with obtaining and maintaining those academic performance standards? We kind of hit on it, but you have instructors like yourself who are trying to make a difference. Why do you think it's hard for those students to really grasp that after being the material being presented to them and maintain it?
This is something Jermyn and I have talked a lot about, and you know, we'll be talking about debate and what that's done for our students. But I think because of some of the historical things I was talking about, which in turn have become cultural things, I think our students don't necessarily see the value of a lot of the things we learn in class, like, you know, history and language arts. They don't really see the necessity or the importance of reading. And so even though they use a lot of these skills like inferencing skills and
Yes.
like drawing conclusions, skills they use in day-to-day life when they're not at school, at home. As soon as they enter a classroom, these same skills that they use become something different, something abstract, something kind of separated from things they're really doing in everyday life, but they don't realize they're doing.
Exactly.
So for whatever reason, I think, you know, and again, those historical things that we've talked about, those cultural things we've talked about, I think they enter a classroom, they're like, oh, you know, we're not learning anything important here. These skills aren't important. And they're not connecting with the material in a way that I think would help them be successful in the classroom.
And you're going to add to that, yeah.
Add to that a bit. I was just reading some a national study by Northwestern's English department that talked about how ethnic pride is as directly attached to learning and achievement as any other form of education that we could provide. I mean, our students are detached. They do not have a sense of cultural pride. They are looking for identity and in turn purpose. And so those are the components that I saw, you know, at a very early age growing up in Jacksonville myself. I actually went to Bowles High School, and I lived on the north side, and just traveling across the bridge, you know, I could see two different worlds. But it gave me balance. It really did at a very young age, and I did not want our students to miss out on that opportunity.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Could poor performance also exist due to a student's lack of ability to comprehend and then articulate what is being presented in that classroom? I mean, they start out probably, say for instance, if you were in the classroom and you're motivated and you're an instructor that's really bringing the information forward, but then you have a student who is shy or they're not as confident, but they have the ability, it's just hard for them to express it. Do you believe that's also something that a lot of students deal with, which can contribute to what you're talking about?
Yeah, wholeheartedly. I do think our students are struggling with how to express themselves because there's so much emphasis put on presentation rather than knowledge and wisdom, you know, and identity. So they are trying to be something that they're not ultimately.
Wow.
And I think that the sooner we can tap into who they are, which is the root of education, to pull from within, not to put something from the outside on, and we can get away from repetition and recitation, then the better they'll be at, you know, learning, because learning is an ongoing experience.
Exactly.
You know? But we've been taught to go to high school and make good grades so you can get to college and graduate and then get a good job, and that's it. Well, if that was the case, I don't think we'd have the excessive amount of unemployment we have, and we would have the economic drain we have and the problem with the dropout crisis if that was the case.